I remember the night everything changed as if it had been carved into my memory by fire. My name is Nova Sinclair, and I had always believed in control. My life looked perfect on the surface, my career as a model, my studies, my family, but I was blind to the darkness that lurked behind smiles and empty compliments. People often confuse charm with trust, and I was about to learn that some smiles hide knives. Damon Carrick was one of those smiles, one of those knives. The first time I saw him, he appeared harmless, charming, confident, magnetic, but beneath the surface he thrived on breaking people. I should have seen it in his eyes, the way they flickered when he noticed my weakness, but I didn't. I wanted to trust, and that was my first mistake. It started small, a rumor here, a manipulation there. He watched me, learned my routines, my insecurities, and most importantly, my boundaries. I thought I was careful. I thought I could navigate the social labyrinth of his charm, but Damon didn't play fair. He waited silently, letting me believe I was safe, letting me trust him, letting me expose myself before he tore it all apart. One night, at a fashion event, he humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. It was subtle enough that no one could fully accuse him, yet devastating enough that I wanted to vanish. That was the night I realized that some people live by the destruction of others, and I had been standing in his path. The aftermath was unbearable. My confidence, carefully curated over years of hard work, felt shattered. People whispered, friends distanced themselves. I felt my reputation, my identity, slipping from my grasp. The irony is, I had built my world meticulously, polished to perfection, and he shattered it with a smile. I went home that night, tears burning my cheeks, hands trembling, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly powerless. But amidst the chaos, something awakened inside me, a quiet, terrifying resolve. I would not remain a victim. I would not let him continue. And if he thought he had won, he had no idea that his actions had created a storm he couldn't escape. The first step was to disappear from his radar. I erased everything online, deleted accounts, changed routines, and assumed the guise of someone unremarkable. But in truth, I was sharpening my mind, studying him, watching his patterns, understanding his vulnerabilities. Revenge requires patience, and I had plenty. Every detail mattered. The friends he trusted blindly, the insecurities he hid behind arrogance, the moments when his mask slipped. I cataloged them all in my mind, waiting for the perfect moment. Weeks passed and I watched him unravel subtly. I planted tiny seeds of doubt among his friends, whispered the truths he didn't want them to see. I watched as cracks appeared in his carefully maintained image. For someone like Damon, control was life. I took it piece by piece. It was thrilling in a silent, terrifying way. I had transformed from the girl he underestimated into something he couldn't predict, a silent storm gathering strength. And with every passing day, my confidence grew. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is rash, revenge is calculated, and I had learned to calculate with deadly precision. Then came the moment I knew I was ready. He underestimated me completely, believing I was broken, fragile, and defeated. He didn't realize that broken people can be dangerous, especially when they rebuild themselves into weapons. I had rehearsed every interaction, every word, every move. I had documented his mistakes, his betrayals, every hidden act that he thought no one could see. My revenge wouldn't be loud, and it wouldn't be immediate. It would be meticulous, and it would leave him questioning everything he ever knew about power. The first strike was subtle. I targeted his network, the friends he trusted most. The people he assumed were loyal beyond question began to hesitate. Doubt spread like wildfire. Then came the manipulations in his professional world. Questions whispered to the right people. Alliances shifted, and slowly, his image began to crumble. He could sense the instability, but he had no idea where it originated. He was losing control piece by piece without realizing that it was the same girl he had thought he destroyed orchestrating it all, and it felt exquisite. But revenge isn't just about dismantling someone externally. It's about breaking their confidence, their sense of identity. So I began entering spaces he thought were safe, revealing truths he never wanted to be revealed. Every lie he told, every manipulation, every betrayal was mirrored back to him in ways he couldn't ignore. I became a ghost in his world, present yet unseen, striking with precision, leaving chaos in my wake. People began noticing. His closest allies grew uncertain, questioning loyalties, wondering if Damon was truly the person they believed him to be. That's when the cracks became visible. The next phase involved striking where it would hurt most, emotionally. Damon's arrogance made him blind. He never considered that someone he had humiliated and toyed with would grow intelligent, patient, and strategic. I made sure he felt fear without understanding its source. Shadows whispered around him, whispers of truth, hints of exposure. It wasn't just revenge, it was poetic justice. I was making him see the consequences of arrogance, cruelty, and manipulation. I wasn't just hurting him, I was teaching him, demonstrating that actions have consequences far beyond immediate perception. And every small victory strengthened me, fueled me, reshaped me. By the time the final phase approached, Damon was visibly unsettled. He looked over his shoulder, doubted friendships, mistrusted himself, and for the first time, experienced vulnerability. The girl he had tried to destroy no longer existed. In her place stood Nova Sinclair, a force forged from betrayal, tempered by pain, and sharpened by determination. My heart no longer quivered at the thought of confrontation. I had calculated everything, anticipated every move, prepared for every contingency. When I finally stepped into the space where confrontation was inevitable, I was calm, collected, and unstoppable. And the moment he realized who I had become was the moment my revenge truly began. The days that followed my first strikes against Damon were the most exhilarating I had ever experienced. Every morning I woke with a sense of purpose that had been absent from my life for years, as if the void he had created inside me had been replaced by fire. I moved silently through the world, observing, calculating, planting subtle threads of chaos that would later tighten around him until he couldn't breathe. To everyone else, I was still Nova Sinclair, the calm, composed, elegant girl, just another figure in the shadows of social events and industry gatherings. But beneath that carefully curated exterior, I was an architect of destruction. I had learned to anticipate every move, every reaction, every lie Damon had ever told, and I intended to use it all. I began with his inner circle, the people he trusted without hesitation. Everyone has weaknesses. The trick is to find them and exploit them with precision. I discovered that Damon had a profound dependence on perception. He was addicted to approval, validation, the illusion of control. His friends weren't just allies. They were extensions of his ego. If I could dismantle that, I could unravel him without touching him directly. Rowan, the so-called loyal friend, was the easiest. He craved recognition, wanted desperately to feel smarter than everyone else. I whispered truths, disguised as coincidences, letting Rowan discover small fragments of Damon's duplicity. By the time he confronted Damon in private, Damon's mask had already begun to slip, though he didn't realize it yet. That confrontation planted the first real seed of doubt. From then on, every move Rowan made carried hesitation, and hesitation for Damon was poisonous. Next came Alia. Her devotion to Damon was almost religious. She believed in him unquestioningly, admired him obsessively, and depended on his approval like a lifeline. But devotion hides insecurity, and I found hers. Alia's fear of being overlooked was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew it was there. I introduced small anomalies in her world, fleeting comments, misinterpreted glances, carefully placed observations that made her question Damon's affection. She began to notice things she had ignored for years. The way he laughed too easily at other women, the dismissive tone in his conversations, the way he never acknowledged her contributions in public. Her trust faltered, and once trust falters, suspicion takes root. Damon didn't notice it at first. Narcissists rarely do until it's too late. Mason was the final piece, strong, confident, unwaveringly loyal, at least on the surface. But loyalty can crumble if the foundation is shaken. I didn't need to attack Mason directly. I only had to make him see that Damon didn't deserve him. A carefully timed revelation here, a truth delivered in a way that seemed accidental there. Mason began observing Damon differently, questioning decisions he had never questioned before. The cracks began to form in Damon's network, and as his allies wavered, his control weakened. I reveled in this silence, the quiet unraveling of the empire he had built on manipulation. Every misstep he made became a weapon in my hands, a stepping stone toward his eventual destruction. I didn't need to confront him directly yet. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about precision, and I had mastered precision. I became a ghost in his world, always present but never detected. I knew when he was alone, who he trusted, and when his defenses were lowest. I catalogued every habit, every pattern, every hidden insecurity, storing them like ammunition for the final strike. This was the art of revenge, the silent, patient dismantling of someone who once believed they were untouchable. Then came the subtle chaos that I orchestrated outside his inner circle. Damon was a public figure in many social circles, and reputation was his lifeline. I used social media, whispers in the right ears, planted doubts in influential people he depended on. He began to notice hesitation in new places, subtle shifts in behavior from colleagues and acquaintances. The unraveling that started with his closest friends now spread outward, leaving him isolated and paranoid. He was still confident in public, still charming, but I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. He was becoming restless, anxious, unpredictable, and that would make him reckless, and that was when I escalated. I arranged a series of encounters where he would feel out of control. A leaked email here, a subtle manipulation of a meeting there. Every detail of his carefully curated image was under scrutiny, and he didn't even know the architect was someone he had underestimated. He walked into these traps like a predator entering a snare, blind to the danger because he believed he was untouchable. I watched detached as panic began to set in. Damon, who once thrived on control, who manipulated everyone like pieces on a chessboard, was now reacting instead of initiating. That was power. That was satisfaction. But I wasn't done. External chaos is only part of revenge. True revenge cuts deeper into the psyche. I needed him to understand fear, humiliation, and vulnerability. I needed him to experience helplessness the way I once did. So I began to play with his mind. Shadows whispered, messages appeared, evidence surfaced, carefully crafted to make him doubt every interaction, every word, every friend. He began seeing threats where none existed. His once unshakable confidence faltered. Paranoia crept in, and it was intoxicating. I had become the storm he had ignored, the shadow he had dismissed, the ghost he had believed he had conquered. One evening, I orchestrated the ultimate confrontation. It wasn't physical. It was psychological, strategic, and public in just the right way. I invited his closest allies to an event under the guise of celebration, while ensuring that the truth of his manipulations and betrayals would surface through leaks and well-placed revelations. I watched as disbelief turned into horror, horror into anger, and anger into isolation. He tried to respond, to charm, to explain, to manipulate, but the world no longer listened. His network, his allies, his support system, all crumbled before him. Damon realized, finally, that every person he believed loyal had been questioning, judging, and abandoning him. That realization is the true poison of revenge, and I let him taste it slowly. By the end of the night, Damon Carrick was unrecognizable, not broken physically, but annihilated mentally and socially. Every carefully built layer of arrogance and control lay in ruins. And as I observed him from a distance, watching the realization settle into his eyes, I felt a cold satisfaction that words cannot describe. The girl he had tried to destroy had become something far greater. I had not only survived, I had conquered with patience, strategy, and unrelenting resolve. Damon would never underestimate anyone again, and yet, even as I walked away from the chaos I had orchestrated, I knew that revenge, once tasted, changes a person forever. I had walked through fire, and fire had burned away the girl I once was. What remained was stronger, sharper, untouchable. Damon's defeat was complete, but my journey had only just begun. Pain had been my teacher, betrayal my mentor, and revenge my instrument. And as I disappeared into the night, unseen but all-knowing, I understood that true power lies not in dominance, but in patience, precision, and unflinching resolve. The night was still, the kind of darkness that felt alive, watching, waiting. I had planned this moment for months, every detail, every variable, every reaction anticipated. My heart no longer raced with fear. It beat with a steady, cold rhythm, the rhythm of someone who had survived hell and returned stronger. Damon had finally reached a point where he no longer suspected me, where his arrogance convinced him that the worst had passed. He didn't know that the storm had been gathering right under his nose, silent, patient, inevitable. I arrived at the location, a secluded mansion far from the city lights, where I had arranged a private gathering under the guise of reconciliation. Damon, foolish and blinded by his own ego, had accepted. He had believed he could charm, manipulate, and regain control. He was wrong. Every ally he trusted had been subtly informed, every detail orchestrated to collapse around him at the precise moment. Tonight, Damon Carrick would confront the full consequence of his actions, and there would be no escape. I stepped into the grand hall, the silence thick and suffocating. The chandeliers cast fractured light across the polished marble floor, reflecting my calm demeanor. Every movement I made was deliberate, every glance calculated. Damon entered moments later, dressed impeccably, smiling with that same infuriating confidence that had once unsettled me. But this time I saw him clearly. I saw the cracks forming beneath the surface, the subtle hesitation, the doubt. I had made him doubt the very foundation of his world. "Nova," he said smoothly, a tempting charm, "I didn't think you'd come." I smiled, a cold, deliberate smile. "I always come when the time is right." He laughed, but it faltered. There was something in my gaze, something sharp, precise, that made him uneasy. I could see it, the recognition that he no longer controlled the narrative, that the hunter had become the prey. And he hated it. Narcissists do not handle the loss of control gracefully. The first phase was exposure. Every hidden betrayal, every cruel act, every manipulation Damon had orchestrated was revealed through projections, messages, and audio recordings I had accumulated over months. The room was silent except for the shocking clarity of the evidence. His closest allies, seated in disbelief, stared at him with eyes that once adored him. The walls of his kingdom were crumbling. Damon's eyes darted around. This isn't real," he stammered, trying to maintain composure. I don't understand." "Oh, you understand," I said softly, my voice calm but filled with steel. "You just didn't think anyone would notice. Panic replaced arrogance." He tried to speak, to charm, to manipulate. Every lie he had depended on had been stripped away. Every person who once trusted him had seen the truth. He realized the depth of my planning, the patience I had exercised, the intelligence he had so arrogantly dismissed. For the first time, Damon felt powerless, and it was exquisite to witness. Then I delivered the personal strike, the one that would shatter him completely. I had obtained evidence of his private betrayals, acts of cruelty, secrets he had hidden from everyone. Friends, colleagues, even strangers he had manipulated for pleasure now confronted him, each revelation tearing away at the fabric of his ego. The man who had once believed himself untouchable was exposed, humiliated, and isolated in a way he could never recover from. He lunged at me in desperation, rage distorting his features, but I was ready. Calm, precise, deliberate. Daniel, my ally, intercepted, restraining him with ease. But it wasn't physical strength that ended him. It was psychological. Every word, every gesture, every carefully orchestrated moment had prepared him for this moment of reckoning, and it was beautiful in its precision, like a symphony of vengeance. You think this is revenge? Damon growled, shaking with fury and disbelief. This is nothing. You will nothing, I interrupted. Everything you built, everything you thought you controlled is gone because of your own choices. I didn't create your downfall, I revealed it. His face contorted, the mask of arrogance gone, replaced by the raw terror of a man who realized he had no allies, no secrets, no power. I had stripped him to the core, leaving only the hollow shell of someone who once thought he could break me. And now he understood the consequences of underestimating the person he tried to destroy. By the end of the night, Damon Carrick was not merely defeated, he was annihilated. His reputation lay in ruins, his closest allies had abandoned him, and the psychological scars I inflicted ensured he would never rise again. And I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate. I simply stepped back, the calm in my chest unshakable. Revenge is not about enjoyment. It's about justice executed with precision, and justice had been served. Walking away from that mansion, the first light of dawn breaking across the horizon, I felt an unfamiliar weight lift from my shoulders. The girl who had cried, trembled, and suffered had vanished. In her place stood Nova Sinclair, salient, formidable, unbroken, unstoppable. I had survived fire, and fire had forged me anew. And as the city awoke around me, unaware of the storm that had passed through its shadows, I understood the truth I had discovered. Power is not taken, it is cultivated, and those who believe they can destroy others without consequence will inevitably meet someone who refuses to remain broken. I had become that someone. I had endured, I had planned, and I had risen. Damon Carrick had taught me everything I needed to know about cruelty. And in return, I had shown him the ultimate lesson in the art of revenge. From that day forward, I moved through life differently. The world had not changed, but I had. I was no longer afraid, no longer naive, no longer anyone's victim. I had faced the darkness, absorbed it, and emerged stronger than the storm itself. The path of vengeance had been treacherous, painful, and isolating, but it had delivered clarity, empowerment, and closure. And for the first time in my life, I understood the magnitude of survival, the potency of patience, and the unstoppable force of someone who refuses to break. Nova Sinclair had been forged in the flames of betrayal, refined in the crucible of revenge, and now she walked into the world unafraid, unbroken, and untouchable. Damon Carrick was gone, not physically, perhaps, but utterly, completely, and permanently destroyed in the only way that mattered. And as I disappeared into the shadows, blending once more with the world that had once seemed so cruel, I smiled, not because of hate, not because of triumph, but because I had reclaimed what was always mine, myself.